Greetings, Internet. Welcome to another fun-filled episode of the Comic Watchers Show. I'm your host, Matt Meyer. With me, as always, are mighty Mike Eakins and nomenclature Nicholas Osborne.
Okay, I mean, all right.
Yeah, right. Whatever fits.
We have a fantastic show in store for you. We are getting into the one, the only planet-sized X-Men #1, the book that promised to change the universe and kind of had some big repercussions. And we're going to really dive into this and, all things X-Men. But first, unless you've been living under a rock, the internet has been abuzz this week. It's been a fire with scandal and filth and just the degradation and erosion of human morality and biblically based morality. Of course, I'm talking about Heroes Don't Do That, aka Batman versus Cunnilingus. So, unless you've been living under a rock,
big one.
On Monday, Variety spoke with Justin Halpern from HBO Max's Harley Quinn cartoon, the animated series, of course, and he revealed that they had tried to write a scene in which Batman goes down on Catwoman. And they were explicitly told, you can't do that. Heroes don't do that. So, obviously, the internet has just exploded with this, and memes everywhere, and it's just one of those things that can only happen in our postmodern society, where something as absolutely insane as we're talking about Batman's oral sex habits can be conflated with why are we talking? Are we talking about this? So, Nick, what the heck are your thoughts on this kerfuffle?
It is. Comics Discourse took a wild turn this week. It's actually been a full wild week for indie comics discourse, but this one really had a lot of people talking, actually. I think Val Kilmer posted about it.
Really?
It kind of made the rounds where now everybody's giving their opinions on, do heroes do that? And, what makes a hero for doing it? What a wild conversation. Comics Twitter is unlike any other fandom I've ever been a part of. And this is something, so now we've got fan art coming of this. There's a lot of different things happening from this, but ultimately it's that heroes do in fact do that. And I think whoever sent that message, we may not know who exactly it is, but they have certainly seen the reaction to those words, and there's no way that DC is not kind of hanging their heads, similar to when the Black Label Batwing thing happened. Yes. And DC just finds themselves in these types of situations, and I have no possible reasonable explanation for it, but man, social media eats it up, right?
Oh yeah.
Oh, for sure.
I've seen a couple, just a couple. But, Mike, what about you? What do you think, buddy?
Well, heroes may or may not do that, but, gentlemen, if I may bring up Tom King's wedding issue, why did she leave him? Gentlemen, maybe we now know.
Now we know. Mystery solved.
So
DC wasn't just yanking our chains.
Right. So if anyone has a link to Tom King, make sure he sees this episode. Tom, buddy, I get it now. And all joking aside, it's one of those things that you just kind of shake your head at. Heroes, I get it, but let's look at Batman's history. Batman's a vigilante, first and foremost, before the shirt, before the logo, before anything. And sure, heroes don't do that, but yeah, they can go ahead and, and beat people to an nth second to their life. And that's okay. That's fine. But just anything dealing with intercourse, that's too taboo. We can't do that. And that's fine. Let's not, for the folks that may or may not know watching this, the Harley Quinn show that's on HBO is an adult targeted.
Yes.
No, it's very
It's
adult
hard
targeted.
R. It's basically an Adult Swim show.
Right.
Yeah.
Pretty much. And so it's like, heroes don't do that. Well, why don't they? We're not talking about the animated series. We're not talking about the, I can't remember the name of it, but like the superhero girls with you
literally just said the name of it.
Yeah.
The superhero girls with like Bumblebee and all them.
Yeah.
So it's not like we're talking about that type of cartoon or that type of show.
The Harley Quinn cartoon is not being marketed. Right. There's no action figures being made out of this.
No, there's not even.
You can't go to Walmart and find the Batcat missionary style 2-pack of them or anything.
Wait, hold on, stop. They have those?
For instance.
Okay.
That apparently heroes only have really boring sex and are selfish lovers. So,
right. But it's one of those things where I'm just kind of like, DC is like you said, going back to to the Batwing, it's like, why are we blushing at this stuff? We're 2021. Why are we blushing? It's a cartoon, or you're not gonna see it as a cartoon. It's a show penned for adults. It's okay to go ahead and bring up adults.
This isn't something new for them. Like even something that's adult, like the animated Killing Joke movie they did.
Yeah,
had Batman sleeping with Barbara, who was
on a rooftop, wasn't it?
Yeah, and it was like a full-blown sex scene, and they had like an intimate relationship between Gordon and Batman. So then it was really awkward that he was like getting with his daughter, and they had no problem like showing Batman in these positions in this circumstance and selling toys of him then. But when it comes to this and this Harley Quinn show, that's too much. Heroes don't do that. And flash to the rooftop scene in Killing Joke. It's like, where are these decisions coming from? And then the Black Label series in Batman. It's a wild thing that DC finds themselves in, but they kind of keep doing it, right? They keep putting their foot in their mouth. And
right.
I have zero explanation for it, but
okay, so let's just for the sake of argument, let's try to play devil's advocate and put ourselves in the brain space of a suit and tie, never read a comic before, Warner Brothers DC exec. Sure. And here are these wild and crazy guys, and they come here like, yeah, we want to do this thing where Batman's going down on Catwoman, and they don't. Honestly, I'm going to almost guarantee you they don't know what the product is, but they're thinking about their brand. Their brand is explicitly, first and foremost, how do we get the most amount of money out of this IP? And we get the most amount of money out of this IP by making sure that, to a certain degree, it's sanitized for the most amount of people possible. Now, where the hypocrisy comes in, like you were saying, Mike, is that it's perfectly okay for Batman to beat the crap out of people on a nightly basis and, whatever. But any sort of sex positivity is a no-no. And that, to me, speaks more to the inherent conservatism and prudishness that's been endemic in American society for, I don't know, ever. But certainly since the 80s, when the moral majority was rattling cages and having hootenannies and stuff like that. Right. And, I really think that this silliness is just an outgrowth of that mentality. And it's dumb. Like, we could sit here and make memes about it all day, but there really is this underlying thing that it's okay to show violence to kids and peddle that, but it's not okay for sex in an adult-themed cartoon show. Like, shut up. I mean, just stop.
I think for me, it's like I would like to know, like, and obviously I'm not, when I say Jim Lee, I'm not trying to, force blame on him by any means, but like, I wonder if someone like Jim Lee or someone with a comics background was in on this board meeting when they were like, this and that, or if this was a straight like you said, Matt, like a straight up, just suit and tie. This is just all the, your super strong CEO type guys
Right.
and women that are in, this meeting that we're going, well, I don't know if Batman would do that. Would Batman do that? This and that.
I don't know. I feel like this is sort of like part of the writer's room discussion where there's probably a million of these ideas that get thrown out.
Mhm,
And this is probably like the most hilarious one that got rejected. So that's why it leaked. And I imagine there's a ton of other things that the internet would blow up about and like love to make fan art about and tons of funny tweets about that we just didn't get. But this one just it ties into way too many like historical things with DC and sort of their suppression of sex positivity and expressions of sexuality. Even their Valentine's issue couldn't have queer people kissing. There's the thing here that it's tapped into, and I think that's what social media's latched onto, because it's like, here we are again in this position, and so there's something there. Yeah, I stumbled into that one, but I think there is something to say about it. And as funny as it is something that keeps coming up for DC. So it's something that fans are latching onto. And if anything, this is awesome publicity for the Harley Quinn animated series, right?
Absolutely.
What an unintended consequence that worked out so well for this writer to be like, shooting down these ideas. And then just that act is what's getting all this promotional value for the series. Like, people are going to be checking it out.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And I think there's a case to be made, too, for this kind of going back to, excuse me, that DC comics are a little more stuffy. They're your dad's comics. They lack a certain edge historically. And I guarantee you, if it was, a Marvel-made Harley Quinn-esque show that was hard R-rated, they'd have zero problem going there if that idea was thrown out there. It's like, I'm Captain America eat Sharon Carter's ass. And they'd be like, hell yeah! So,
thank you for tuning into the Comic Watcher show. Next week, we'll talk about
But
we're gonna have to cover Power Rangers or something next week and like family friendly this up.
Like the Flintstones or something. We need something.
Next week, the Doubles and Bam Bam Hour revisited.
I would like to try to expand this into something about comics discourse, because we've already moved on from that. I mean, we're doing the show right now and kind of laughing about it, but comics discourse has already moved on. In the last 2 days has been all about comics piracy. And it's been a pretty interesting thing to see everybody swap so quickly, going from talking about Batman going down on Catwoman into, the damage that comics piracy has on indie creators and smaller publishers.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that speaks to, the fandom in the industry and the type of passion that it generates, is that it's always on. There's always something happening. And as quick as we try to move at Comic Watch, it's so difficult to keep up with how many things are happening. Because now when you get on social media, it's not really all the memes and fan art of Batman and Catwoman so much. It's all these hot takes on piracy in the industry. Mm-hmm. And I mean, we just decided to do the show like this week too, and it already moved on so quickly. Mm-hmm. It's just something that's a part of it, and maybe that's a good thing for DC and the Harley Quinn series. Everybody has.
I'm sure DC is breathing a sigh of relief. Right. But this the shiny light syndrome that you're describing with fandom kind of is, from what you're saying. I mean, it's good that we're all able to kind of talk about these broad topics. But I would say it's also kind of self-defeating, because we talk about things and move to the next thing so quick that, it basically everything becomes a hot take. And then we're on to the next thing without having like meaningful end to the discourse. The piracy conversation is hugely important right now. And I've seen some really thoughtful things come about from a lot of creators and fans. And, I want that conversation to perpetuate. But I mean, sure enough, like tomorrow, Aquaman's going to have a leaked tape with Mara's sister or something. And, we'll be talking about that instead. But it's just kind of the nature of both, social media and internet culture in general, that these things happen so lightning fast. And, there's probably a larger discussion to be had about what's happening to everybody's attention span and all this. But This is not that show.
Right? Yeah, this is
I mean, it is like, it's fun to look at sort of the collision of discourse that happens where you've got Val Kilmer talking about, their interpretation of Batman and what would happen with Catwoman. And then just a day later, you've got some of the most intellectual people and comic scholars talking about the economic impacts of piracy and what these websites are doing to sales and how that rolls down and impacts creators.
Well,
And I think it's like a contrast that is so astounding, and you don't really see it in many other places.
Really, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, social media in general is today's, news anchor. Like our parents grew up watching Walter Cronkite and folks like that, pre-social media. Now that's how we get our news, and it's up to us to kind of, we're digging through misinformation and we're digging through all this other stuff, but that's why it moves so quick. It kind of jacks up our attention span and stuff, but but this is our news thing, like a couple days ago, like you said, we were talking about Batman and his practices when he's not on the clock, so technically
or on the clock.
I don't know what he does on his lunch break.
Conversation with Alfred.
I don't know. Well, Alfred's not around anymore, sir. Sorry, that was bad. I'm sorry. Bad joke. I'm sorry. I apologize. I think and that speaks a little bit for that discourse because, like I said, a few days ago, we were concerned about Batman. Now we're talking about piracy, and really social media kind of clings on to, okay, well, it's not so much what's important, but it kind of steers us to what road we want to go down for the next 20 seconds.
Right. Absolutely.
It does have an impact on sort of like the fandom and comics culture and what's, impacting, what's influencing that and what's shifting it. If a panel comes out in a few months where anything is even hinted towards that, it's going to blow up because that's sort of part of the culture now. It's becoming ingrained in it. And the Batwing jokes still happen because of that reason. And I think that it's not a coincidence that everybody's had a laugh and then we're moving on to serious things like comics piracy. You can sort of see that ebb and flow happen. And it's really cool to we follow the industry so closely at Comic Watch. That's what we do every day, and we're kind of tasked with keeping up with what everybody's looking at and talking about. And sometimes it's super silly and we're not really sure, can you write an article on this? Is this news or is this just like a trendy thing that's happening that everybody's already aware of and there's no really commentary to be had on it, compared to something like privacy where there's clearly room for insightful growth to be had through journalism and the perspective of creators. But I don't know what we're getting out of Batman going down on Catwoman. Just a laugh? I don't really know.
Well, I'm going to be looking for some very lengthy 4,000 word articles in the next issue of the New Yorker about this subject. I can promise you that. Until then,
maybe somebody's working on it.
You never know. But until then, it is an interesting contrast between how fandom is able to make that swing, and when silly things happen, it's and someone sticks their foot just up their in their mouth all the way up to their shin bone. It's fun to laugh at. I just. Everybody is collectively shaking their head at just how ludicrous this situation is, and we could do no less. So
it's true. I think Cody in the Slack chat while we were talking about it said, "Whoever said this needs a personal editor." And it's like, man, I kind of wish so. Just if you could take that word back.
Yeah. Oh yeah, good times. Well, speaking of good times, we're gonna segue to planet-sized X-Men. So, this is the big one. Hellfire Gala is in full swing. Marvel's been promising something big was coming for the X-Men out of this event. They would not say what. Well, now we know what. Oh, and by the way, spoilers on. It's absolutely impossible to talk about this comic without spoilers, other than holy shit, it's amazing. 10 out of 10 would recommend. that would be a short and sucky podcast. So spoilers are on. Pause it if you haven't read Planet Size X-Men. Go read it. Come back and let us know what you think in the comments too, because the X-Men went and made a world for mutants, and they took Mars and terraformed it and made it habitable to support life. And not only that, they basically declared themselves the kings of the entire galaxy. So, baller move. And yeah, let's talk about it. Mike, go ahead.
Let me unmute myself. Okay. Yeah, this was actually really rad. I enjoyed it for the most part. I'm more interested to see where this goes post this issue. You know, I do like the team of Laraz and Duggan to kind of like we've seen them before. Actually, you know, they've been on this era and through all the other X books, and now they're on this particular X book, which is good because it kind of, the art for me kind of stood out a little more than the story itself. I'm probably in the minority, and that's fine, but I really do like how, especially like Magneto and then the Krakoa, the colors of Krakoa and all that stuff, they just kind of pop and they just resonate so well through the story. Not taking any away from the story itself, because the story itself is on point. Even for someone that's me, that is a moderate X-Men reader, I just wait till they gather up the 50 issue, series releases, and we just kind of, take it from there. But how they're terraforming Mars and everything is kind of speaks really well in the fact that this can't be it. And I was thinking about I want to say it was one of our Hawks Pock shows that, and Matt, I want to say it was you that said something about Hickman kind of playing that long card. That
I've been beating that drum for a while.
Yes. So
yeah,
and this is a perfect, this issue is a perfect Hickman long card being played, because something is getting ready to happen. We don't know what it is, but something is that payoff is here. Now, maybe in a year or two, maybe this issue plays a bigger part. I don't know. But right now it plays that part, but I don't know. And I could be wrong, but I don't know if it plays that big of part as we think it's playing right now. I think the payoff is coming. I want to say that, like, Magneto, obviously, as what he did, what he's done, and what he's doing with Krakoa, obviously a big leadership role. No one has done what he has done, I think, up until this point. Now with him kind of taking the lead in this, I think we're going to see something pretty big. But overall, this book was fabulous, but I think this sets up everything going into the new X-Men series, which sees this same creative team kind of taking the helm and leading it in. So I'm super intrigued at when they take over X-Men to kind of see what carries on. And obviously with the rest of Hellfire Gala and what's coming down the pike. But this is a very interesting issue that I think you need to read a few times to kind of really soak it in. Like, I read it, I put it down, I came back to it a few hours later, and I found myself kind of just asking more questions and kind of just looking at the panels and the art a little differently. But not a super complex book, but I think it's definitely going to be one that is going to stick out among the Hickman era, because I think there's something more with this book. I just don't think we're seeing it right now.
No, so a couple of your points. Like you were saying, I've very long held that Hickman is playing a roughly 3-year long game, long-form story across all of these. And I feel like, just kind of looking at narrative arcs in general, this is kind of like the end of the second act. So Mutant Kind has hit its peak,
Yeah.
It's looking like everything amazing is that's only on the upswing for them, but it's somehow or another going to come crashing down. So what do we know is coming up? Well, we know we got the trial of Magneto. We don't know what it's about. We don't know what it's for. We can kind of put some elementary things together that Mystique is probably involved because of Inferno, the Inferno event that's coming up. And we've had the seeds of the Mystique thing being seeded for a while. So it would be very in character for Mystique to wreck everything just to get back at Xavier and Magneto for not resurrecting Destiny.
That's fair.
So my thought is she's going to frame Magneto for something.
Oh.
The other half of that is the recent reemergence of Nimrod and Orcus.
Yeah.
They're coming for the X-Men, period, and mutants everywhere. Like, this is not a coincidence, and this is not happening in a vacuum. I really think we're going to see a big, like, biblical proportions fall of mutants. And, I mean, since they've been repurposing old story titles, that would actually be very fitting to repurpose the fall of the mutants. Literally just thought that. So, I loved this comic. Art. So, Mike, you were talking about how gorgeous the art is.
Yeah, I loved it.
Captures the scope of what's happening in here. Like Pepe Larraz just was already high on my radar, but he just jumped to like one of my favorite artists going right now.
Right.
Because he sells this thing so well.
Yeah.
Like, Brian Hitch could have done something similar. And I mean, if we could sit here and compare Larraz to Hitch, that tells you something right there about the skill level that this dude is working at. And let's just not forget, like you're saying, the colorings from Marte Gracia. God, just gorgeous, man.
Right?
Holy smokes. I just, this book couldn't look more amazing.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
It's supposed to be big, it's supposed to feel big, and it just absolutely does that job perfectly. Nick, what do you think?
I have a lot of thoughts, actually. I enjoy listening to y'all. I think definitely some great points. Yeah, it's visually stunning book. It reminds me, though, it's going to be a deep cut. 2008 horror movie Quarantine comes out. The trailer is super terrifying, and on the poster is like this woman being dragged away and this night vision. Turns out that's the last scene of the movie, and that's kind of the climax of the movie too, and it's all just like posted right there, like on the cover in the trailer. You knew everything that was happening, so when it happened you're like, oh no shit, right? So I already knew all of this. Planet Size X-Men is that, right? Because the spoiler's right there in the freaking title. Whenever it's kind of revealed that they're terraforming Mars, I was like, what a dumbass. It's right there in the title. Like we knew all along, even from this announcement, from what the book was titled, what it was going to be about. And it really wouldn't have been that hard to guess now. I was like brainless going in. I had no idea.
Yeah.
It's like, so it was one of those moves where I was like, oh yeah, this is such a no-brainer. And as we see the expansion of the Krakoa era and where mutants find themselves in society right now and sort of leapfrogging humanity in every aspect, from cultural aspects and religious, so what we're seeing in Way of X and kind of contemplative morality, into the business side and the marketplace, what we're seeing in X Corp, and a whole cultural expansion. So now we've seen that grow into a geographical expansion, and the island comes up. Cap's super worried because now there's millions more mutants. Earth's getting kind of freaked out because humanity is not sure what's going on. And bam, they take it one step farther. And now they're taking Mars. They're terraforming it. They're expanding out there. Humanity's looking like they're being left behind in the dust. And we're kind of seeing that more and more. And that's what I've tapped into more. But I think, Matt, it makes a lot of sense that how do you get to like this biblical level fall of mutants? You have to build them up first, and you have to kind of make it seem like it's such an impossible thing that something this strong could fall. Go ahead, Matt.
Remember too, going all the way back to House of X, every single Moira X timeline ends with the X-Men and mutant kind's death and demise and defeat.
Yep.
Yeah.
That sword of Damocles is hanging over them as we speak, and it has been hanging over them through the entire Krakoa era, and it's yet to be addressed.
And we just keep getting bigger and bigger. So, like, you know, when it first happens, and we're like, wow, Krakoa is kind of massive. Like, mutants are starting their own nation. They're getting sovereignty. This is big. And we're way beyond that even now. I mean, we've got a whole plane. And I think Magneto, I may be incorrect, somebody labeled them the capital of the solar system.
Yeah.
And that was such a big moment. So that immediately kind of sparked a thought for me is, if we're going into kind of this space vision of the Marvel Universe and getting galactic, so we're preparing for a threat that will require a capital of the solar system, which is immediately going to create conflict between humanity on Earth feeling like they need to decide these things and take the mantle for themselves, and mutants being like, you know, we've already basically bested you. We've leaped past, you know, your place in the solar system, and now we're going to make these decisions, and we're taking this upon ourselves. It's really that idea that mutants are no longer sort of this disenfranchised community, or an analogy for it. It's kind of continuing on with that theme of flipping that on its head and growing them into this unstoppable world power that's expanding beyond our world.
Yeah.
And Unit Size X-Men takes that undertaking. But like what you said, Mike, this is also more of a setup. Like, you're more excited about what's to come. So you get a full issue that is basically a sentence worth of, you know, events. Like, the mutants have expanded to Mars. That's the whole issue, basically.
Right.
And that's sort of the weakness of it, I think, is it doesn't tackle anything else other than the basic premise that you can get from a description.
Yeah, but how much more does it need?
Right.
Like, you know, it's such a dynamic that you're not concerned with that. But when you read it again, that's kind of like, okay, there's not much else I'm going to get out of this other than, you know, what that premise is. And now I'm super excited for what's to come. But, you know, I've got everything from this book.
But I mean, other than speculation that runs rampant in the book from first page, last page, but I think that's what makes this book great, is the fact that it's built on speculation. When you're reading this, you're going, oh, what's going to happen next? Oh, will this happen? Well, maybe this doesn't have to happen. Well, maybe this will happen next. So now you find yourself going through your boxes, and you're going back to Hoxpox, you're going back through the X-Corps, and you're going back to X-Men and Excalibur, and every single, you know, issue and title of the Hickman era, trying to find those little Easter eggs. And that's what I think is going to, and to revisit what I said earlier, I think that's what's going to make this book maybe not great in the Hickman era, but I think that's what's going to draw the attention back to it once the payoff happens. Because, like I said, I don't think this book is earth-shattering by any means. I mean, it's an entertaining book. It's a fun book. The art is stupendous. The writing is stupendous. But I just think that the speculation drives, for me, it drives the greatness of this book. And I think that's what kind of sets everything out that's going to come from this book, is just that pure speculation.
Yeah. I mean, it might be me, but does this feel
have a
like...
little bit of a... Oh, go ahead, Nick.
Oh, sorry. Does it feel like, either of y'all, does it feel like this is a bigger or more monumental event that's happening for the Krakoa era than even what we saw in X of Swords? Because there were 22 issues of that event.
It can't not be.
Right?
Don't get me wrong.
We've got 22 issues of this event that, you know, was a lot of fun and had some funny moments.
Yeah, and just looking at that conclusion issue, that was an epic comic in every sense of the word. This is different.
Yeah.
Like,
feels different.
I mean, you read the finale for X of Swords and felt the same way you did the first time you saw Fellowship of the Ring.
Ooh.
Like, at least I did. I mean, I'm not...
It's fair.
Apples to oranges to a certain degree, but just talking about the feeling I took away from it, okay?
Right.
But this was just like, oh wow, you know, you just finished reading it and you can't believe what you just read. There's got this big shit-eating grin on your face because there's the genuine thrill that I don't know what's happening next, where they go from here, what this looks like. I mean, Sword just became the most important book in the X-Men lineup. For real though. Storm is positioned to basically be the regent of soul. I mean,
right?
talk about
Huge
a
part of the
goddess.
terraforming process.
Yeah, I mean, and just all of the little details, the scientific details that Duggan put into the story of like how they actually made Mars habitable and gave it an atmosphere and gave it gravity that's not terrible and brought water to it. You know, I mean, just all of this interesting
And,
stuff.
like, kind of rebooted the whole planet, right? Like, now it's
Basically,
living
right.
again. There's a
But
whole
think
ecosystem.
about that for a second. Think about what Duggan and Hickman are saying about mutants and their ability and potential in general. I mean, a small handful of mutants just breathe life into an entire planet.
Right.
That's big. And
Right.
if you're humanity, if you're the people that are getting left behind by this and being told, we don't need to worry about fitting in with you anymore, we're kind of beyond you now, that's going to be scary as shit. And looking at, and Magneto says it best towards the end. Let me find the quote. He says, humanity will be petulant, bleeding, performative complaints about the loss of a planet that would have remained out of their grasp for generations.
Right.
Yeah.
So now that brings into question what's his. We're not even talking about Hickman's endgame. We're talking about Magneto's endgame now. Like, is he onto something? Like, is his endgame a different? Now, does he have this post Krakoa era kind of vision where he is kind of like El Presidente, if you will, kind of leading this new brotherhood of mutant mankind type of.
I don't know if I would go quite there. I feel like a statement like this just means more coming from Magneto as it would even coming from Xavier or somebody else in the council.
It's a very Magneto thing to say.
True.
It is, right? And it's even a very Magneto approach to the expansion of the mutantdom. It's so elaborate and so grand and so out there that it feels like something that I could see Magneto falling in love with as an ideal future for what mutants can be. Of course, they're the capital of the solar system. Like, of course they are. And I feel like that's such a great moment for them. And, before we get too deep into it, though, we have seen a little bit of controversy towards the end of it. I wanted to get y'all's thoughts here on the show because there's a moment where a guy gets pregnant as a part of, the development of the terraforming in Mars, and it's kind of a consequence, unintended, that may have been intended as a humorous moment, and maybe not. Just wanted to get your thoughts on sort of the use of Marvel taking a pregnant guy and using it as a joke in June for Pride Month in a place where they're already struggling for representation in trans men, and kind of what it means for this issue, as spectacular as it is, to kind of fall back on something like that, or if it's something that's worth addressing.
I definitely want to be very cautious and say that I'm not the authority on this issue. I read the issue, and just as a reader, I think it was not funny necessarily, but it was just more like the circumstances around it. Like, oh God, we weren't expecting Jamie Braddock to take this seriously and actually birth an entire, space station. That's crazy, right? I don't.
A very literal interpretation of what was told.
Yeah, they weren't expecting him to take it so literally. I don't see anything transphobic about that. However, I can't speak from somebody's perspective that is in the trans community. So I want to be sensitive to that and be respectful of differing opinions on it. I seriously doubt anybody intended anything offensive by it, because it's basically a pretty innocuous thing unless you want to see it through that particular lens. And I don't know. It's hard for
the thing that I took out of it, because like the big point of what I saw in a lot of comics discourse was that it was like meant to be the butt of a joke. And when I got to the panel, it didn't feel like it was some setup to be a payoff to a butt of a joke.
No, I mean,
didn't feel like it was.
Guys,
I
this
didn't
isn't
even get
South Park.
much humor.
I mean,
because like you're kind of more shocked at the drama of it all, because you don't really expect that, and I didn't laugh at it. I was just like, oh, like you're really going there, and it's sort of a more sci-fi twist than I would say a comedy twist, and that was my perception.
Like the body horror,
right? Yeah, it was something
honestly,
along those lines, because I didn't get the intention that they were like, okay, this is where the joke lands, and everybody's gonna have a big laugh. It didn't reveal in that way, but I can see like how, because when you set it in context, like you said, this isn't happening in a vacuum. This is happening during Pride Month, and this is happening amidst Marvel kind of fumbling a lot of these decisions. But I don't think that this is one, like definitely that you said, that was intentional by any means. It was written so long ago, probably not determined to even come out in June. But it's one of those instances that you see crop up in an issue that's so spectacular and all the positivity that we've seen around it. There are some things that kind of creep in that, like, maybe this doesn't land as well, maybe it could have been handled differently, but my own perception was kind of it was more of a sci-fi twist than it was a comedy landing, and I think that plays into a lot of the bigger themes of this issue for real, because it is sort of the birthing of a new I don't want to say dawn or era, because it's been so overused in the Krakoa era, but it's sort of this dawn of a new chapter for, what we see for mutants in general, and what Arakko as an island and as a people have gone through. And to me, it was more significant than it was comedic. And I think in that it finds a bit more power in that way, in that perception. And I think it lands better in the comic from that angle too.
Here's my take on it, and this is true not just of this particular sequence, but of anything like this that gets construed by as in poor taste or anything like that. Context and intent matter. Nobody, you can't, like, if you're reading this and looking at for anti-trans humor, like, you'd have to look really hard and be deliberately looking for that interpretation, I think. And it comes down to what you're looking for. But no, I don't believe at all that anybody involved with this comic was deliberately doing something that should be considered anti-trans.
Yeah, I definitely don't either. And I think it speaks to sort of what we've got in this book, and that what Marvel is doing right now, I don't want to say edgy, but they are taking on, the analogy of what mutants are, and they're handling sensitive topics. And I think a lot of people in this comics discourse and what everybody's bringing to the discussion is all important and relevant, and helps shape to see, what we actually see in the content and how we engage with it. But I love that discussion on, where could a book as epic and as huge as this really, if you were to look at it from other angles and in different contexts, how well does it work? And that's sort of where we're going to see this thing holding up, because you've got 22 issues of X of Swords that people really do not consider that to be an event that holds up well on second readings, or is one that's part of a bigger expansion in the X-Men lineup. In this one issue, I think people are going to be talking about in that similar context, that this is a huge moment, and Planet-Size X-Men is going to be referred to for quite a while now in the Krakoa era, and set up so much to come in a way that X of Swords didn't. So there's a lot riding on this.
True,
and
absolutely.
Interesting point to kind of put on that. But now with Duggan taking over, we're going to see a lot more of that, because that's just what it is. And they're handling these topics in a way that we've never seen before. And sometimes it can be jarring, because it's not a realistic scenario for disenfranchised communities to go terraform a new planet and start their own community. It's not a solution. It's not a realistic thing that can happen.
Right.
They're handling these themes and these analogies in ways that are pushing, what can be done in comic storytelling, and what the analogy can mean from this perspective in the Krakoa era. And to me, that's significant.
I think so too. And I'll also be interesting to watch how this impacts the rest of the Marvel universe.
Right. We've seen Cap already freaking out.
Like when are the, after World War She-Hulk or whatever wraps up, I mean, in Avengers, are the Avengers going to fight the X-Men again on Mars?
Yeah.
Something like that. You know, but really, like I'm really interested to watch the ripple effect, and I think Duggan will probably dig into that with the new X-Men title, because based on what I'm seeing out of it so far, the reversion to straightforward superheroics. But what does straightforward superheroics mean in the new context of the X-Men post Planet Size? And that's interesting. Are they going to beat resentment everywhere? Are they going to be the big brother for the humans they're protecting and kind of be condescending about it? You know, because there's been a little bit of condescension in the X-Men's world lately.
Shakes things up a bit.
It is. It's all part of this odd, awkward transition that the X-Men have gone through, and there have definitely been some birth pains, and but it's all been worth it. I've said it before, and I will say it again, and I don't care who hears it. This is absolutely the best the X-Men books have been line wide in the entire 30 years I've been reading comics.
I'll take that. Yeah, sure. Because I mean, even someone like me who's, a moderate X-Men reader, like I said, I've said it numerous times on here. Most of my X stuff is collected. I get tons of the singles, but for me, it always they seem to always kind of just flare out, and there's too much, and you kind of get lost in the shuffle. But with the Hickman era, it's just when you're like, well, maybe I'm reading too much X-Men stuff. Because then here's Marauders getting good, and here's X-Corps come along, and here's the Hellfire Gal, and so you just find yourself kind of just when you think you're done, they pull me back in. But this is definitely some exciting X stuff that's going on. I mean, Planet Size X definitely adds to it.
Yeah.
Not
but
good.
even the so-called lesser X-Men titles right now, maybe the ones that aren't quite as critically acclaimed or catching the world on fire, possibly just viewed as integral. And I'll just use, it's not fair maybe to use X-Corp as the poster child for this, because there's only been 2 issues of it come out so far. But I think a lot of fans were kind of disappointed by the first issue of that. It was just like a little stiff, maybe. It was kind of stiff. Yeah. But it wasn't bad. It was just like still finding its way a little bit, I think. But it's different. Even when it's doesn't quite stick the landing, it's different and it's interesting. And that's at the very, very least what all of the books have going for them right now. So,
I think that's what keeps folks coming back is, obviously, X fans are going to do what X fans do, and they're always going to be X fans. And every part of fandom has that, where they're just going to flock to a book, or they're just going to flock to an episode or whatever, because that's just what they do. They're fans of it. It makes sense to do that. But I think with what you just said, stuff like this and stuff like Planet Size X-Men, that kind of almost reaches out to that nonchalant X fan, or maybe someone that, like I said, once again, would use me, where they don't have to go out of their way, obviously, for special treatment to, hey, read my X book. No, but at the same time, they're having those great stories, those great arts, the great teams, the great creative teams, and it keeps it coming back. And it's great stuff all around for this era, this line so far.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, Planet Size X-Men literally lived up to its title and was also a really awesome comic. And I think we can all agree that we don't know exactly what's coming next for the X-Men, but we know it's going to continue to be massive. And not for nothing, but Sabretooth is still locked up, and I'm waiting for him to burst out at the absolute wrong time from his imprisonment.
It's still there,
He's not
like
happy.
just hang
He's
out.
still there, and he ain't gonna be happy. And Victor,
I think we could do a
Cruz
whole
is
show
nice.
on the amount of like plot threads that have just been left dangling from
Uh-huh.
Moira
I
to
have not
maybe
forgotten
to-
about that.
Yeah, like there's a ton of stuff that just kind of happens, and then they're like, they put it in their back pocket, and then we've got terraforming on Mars, so everybody's
Well,
freaking out over that.
like actually, that was one of the jarring things about the first, I don't know, 12, maybe even 15 issues of Hickman writing adjectiveless X-Men, is he would just do like an issue or two on this one thing and then shift topics. So if you go back to that, there's a ton of stuff that hasn't been touched yet. What's going on with the Brood? Remember?
You're
Yeah,
right.
Brew is king of the Broods now, or something. That was a weird issue. But
there's so much just left.
Yeah,
and I think Ross talked about it maybe in his review on social media that we're at a point where it's almost unfathomable how they could go back to like Westchester, like we saw in Planet X-Men.
absolutely.
Like we see Cyclops standing in front of the mansion, and it feels so foreign and so improbable now. Like, how could you ever get to that point, or would you want to? There's so many things out there that we haven't touched, and it feels like the Krakoa era could really just be getting started. Like, we're still in that foundational sense where they're still laying the groundwork for what it can be, and we're a few years into it. Like, how long can this really go?
What, almost 2 years since Hawks?
Yeah, about 2 years. Yeah.
So
I mean, if it's a 3-year plan, like it's gonna wrap up real quick then. And
I mean, this doesn't end when Hickman's contract expires.
No, definitely not.
I mean, there's no way it can.
We can speculate on that, till we're blue in the face. But Marvel clearly has a critical darling and moneymaker on their hands. They're not gonna they've finally found something that's got everybody talking about X-Men again.
Yeah. And I'm telling you, there's no way this is coincidental between the rise of the X-Men lineup and Marvel's popularity for about 2 years ago when negotiations and transactions were taking place for the license to return back to the cinematic universe. You've got everybody talking about the X-Men. Now we've got the rights and we can play with those toys in the more popular cinematic universe. Come on, all the pieces are right there. Like, if this is all part of a grand plan, like, wow. That could be massive, and maybe we're on the precipice of that.
If they bring mutants into the MCU, starting with the Krakoa era, I will absolutely shit my pants. That will be amazing. That in and of itself would ensure the comics are not going backwards anytime soon.
Exactly. Like, you cement that era.
There's always going to be a segment of fandom that kind of just wants to go back to the way things used to be, blah, 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 whatever, get over your nostalgia. But there's always going to be someone that they want to cater to in that regard, which is why the X-Men Legends comic exists, right?
So true.
It's important for the medium itself and these characters themselves to refresh themselves every so often, every 10 years or so, in order to attract and allure new readers, the next generation of readers. Because if you keep telling the same stories and the same types of stories that you did 50 years ago, eventually people are going to stop reading comics and they're going to move on to the next thing. It's really that simple. It's a creative medium that has to keep the creative juices flowing in order to thrive.
Yeah, it's so true. And I do not believe that Marvel is just oblivious to this type of approach and this popularity that's kind of happening with the Krakoa era, and the fact that, we now can introduce these characters in our cinematic universe. I don't see them being like Westchester is now in the cinematic universe, and that's where we're starting. It makes no sense. It does not fly well with what we've seen from the publisher and from the company. I think that, planet-size X-Men happening, there are bigger things at play here, and they're pushing it really far in the comics. And I don't know how much we could see of that in the films, but at this point, I used to kind of be like, it's a bit of a conspiracy theory to think Krakoa could show up in the cinematic universe. But the more I see it unraveling, the more I see how they're toying with the analogy of mutants and what it means for representation to look forward like that. Ooh, it could fit really well in the cinematic universe. So every time something like Planet Size X-Men #1 happens, I'm like, this could be huge. Like this could mean something not so much as a trajectory to their downfall, like we talked about to start, like this biblical downfall. It could actually mean something as significant as what we think when we first read it. Like they could actually go there. There's potential for them to do that and not just setting it up for the downfall.
I think you're absolutely right. And yeah, just everybody involved in this comic, I mean, from the top down, really, really needs a pat on the back because Planet Size X-Men completely lived up to the hype.
Yep,
and
absolutely.
Planet Size book, like, again, Pepe Larraz and Marty Gracia, just, God, give this duo an Eisner, please. All the Eisners. They're phenomenal artists and deserve so much credit. So, guys, I think we've basically said our final thoughts on this. You know what? Let's have a quick round. We haven't done this in a while. Of what have you been reading and what are you looking forward to? Mike, go for it, bud.
Oh, well, we just wrapped up Bliss. That phenomenal series just wrapped up. And I tell you, I thought I was ready for that final issue, but you know, man, I tell you what, every now and then you're going to run into a book that really strikes a chord. You know, gets personal, and sits down and has a beverage right next to you, and that whole series. I've talked about it before on the show.
Yeah, you've been really high on that.
Yeah. Two of my favorite comics people actually did it. You know, Sean Lewis wrote it. Caitlin Yarsky did the art. She's doing Black Hammer stuff right now. Their first team up book, I guess, if you want to get called Coyotes, which is really cool to check out. Sean Lewis is getting ready to do King Spawn. So I mean, just his
Nick's
stuff.
Not looking forward to that at all.
Yeah, right. I mean, come on. But no, really, you know, Bliss
Mike, what are you looking forward to, buddy?
What am I looking forward to?
What comes out next week?
Next week, I am looking to more copies of Stray Dogs, more second, third, fourth, and fifth printings of this fantastic series. Again, from Image Comics. Stray Dogs, if you could think of The Secret Life of Pets, the movie, combine that with like a horror movie, if you could, that's Stray Dogs. It's two things that shouldn't work, but it really does. This is such a phenomenal series. I love it. All of their variant covers are horror movie homage covers. And so the ones that are really coming out. Yeah. So really good. The ones that I'm looking forward to that coming out is they got a Friday the 13th and a Scream homage covers that are coming out that I'm looking forward to.
Excellent. Nick, what have you been reading?
What have I been reading? So I found just recently, I found on Comixology, just scrolling, they have a horror tab. So it's like, you know, here's 1,000 horror titles that are up on Comixology. So I'm scrolling, like almost doom scrolling through that, and I find House of Penance. And okay, the cover just blew me away, but it's about the Winchester family, the wife who kind of is the heir to the empire. And there's the ghost story, how she's just building onto the house all the time. They made a movie about it. You can go tour the mansion yourself. It's a very popular thing in the horror world. And Peter J. Tomasi wrote this story, Super Sons Tomasi, Detective Comics that maybe didn't land so well for people. But Ian Bertram and then Dave Stewart colors it. So anything Dave Stewart's on, I'm on board, and it's horror.
Absolutely.
It's right in line with what I'm looking for. It's got a crazy, demented approach to it. It works really well for like the ghostly story, and I'm obsessed with it. I really am. But coming out. Yeah, you got next week is Spawn Universe #1, right?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yep.
even I'm tempted to give
That's
that one a look just to see what the hype is about.
You
Right,
need to.
it's right there, and you don't need to know a ton going into it. I know we're at like Spawn 318 right now. Since 300 happened, the symbiote got exploded everywhere. There's tons of new Spawn happening. There's Spawn happening from behind in like historical facts. So the past series that you've seen, like Medieval Spawn, Ninja Spawn, Gunslinger Spawn, they're all coming back. You've got She Spawn now. All these characters are blowing up. The universe is happening. It's going to be pretty huge and epic, but I also want to throw in a quick shout out because we got new pages for Ninjak #1 happening. I think it's coming out July 14th. Javier Pulido has kind of got everybody talking about this approach to Ninjak, whether it's working for them or not. It's super distinctive. It's super stylized. They're doing this like spy noir thriller approach. That's a global approach. It is insane.
That sounds really interesting. Who's writing that?
It's Jeff Parker.
Oh,
so
interesting.
Yes, and it's super different than anything we've seen from Ninjak, but it looks like one of those series that could land as something that's a bit of a testament to sequential storytelling in comics, something that you don't just see. It's not your Pepe Larraz artwork. It's something that is definitely more stylized, but feels like something that you might even see on like the Eisners when you look it up and you're like, I see why people love that book. Like there could be a lot of hype behind this one. So I really hope it lands.
Awesome. As for me, I've been reading an utterly unhealthy amount of Thor. I also recently read through the first 50 issues of New Mutants for like the first time ever. So that was pretty exciting. I've got the rest of the series yet to go as well. What am I looking forward to? We've gone the whole episode without talking much about DC Comics outside of the boudoir. So next week kicks off Infinite Frontier #1 of 6 over at DC. This is where we're finally kind of getting out of the epilogue of Dark Knight's Death Metal and really exploring like what the geography of the new DC Omniverse looks like, what it is, what it means to have everything in continuity all at once, and so on and so forth. It's got President Superman right there front and center on the cover. Alan Scott's in it. They're looking for lost members of the Justice Society. Like, this is just a no-brainer for me. So Zermanico and Romulo Fajardo Jr. are on the art. Yeah, this is going to be a beautiful book. Like, I don't even want to look at preview pages because I don't want to spoil it. But that's it for us. Thank you so much for listening this week. We will be back next week on Saturday for a very special episode in the morning. Who are our guests? You're going to have to wait and see, but it's pretty cool.
Can't wait.
Until next time, support your local comic store, read something good, and above all, be kind to each other. Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Nick. We'll see you all next time.